Who are you? Where are you from? How long have you been in China?
Okay. Oh, I just got really nervous. I'm Erica. I live in China with my husband and our 4-year-old daughter. We are from Australia originally, but we've now been living in China for 2 years.
So I'm Colleen. I'm from Colorado originally. I haven't lived there a long time though, and I've been in China. So this is our second year being here. But we lived in Shanghai for a year about 5 years ago. So we've lived in China now longer than we lived anywhere else abroad, but sort of in 2 different chunks. So since October 2018 for this one.
And where are you currently?
In Fuzhou, in Fujian province, because there's 2 Fuzhous. One is in Jiangxi, one is in Fujian. So,
I didn't know that.
The Fujian one.
Okay.
My name's Azucena Ramirez. My friends call me Susie. I'm from North Carolina, and I've been in China since July 2018. And I am currently in Bali, in Indonesia.
How did you react when you first heard about the virus?
When the Chinese New Year holidays started, we were still sticking close to home. So we hadn't planned any holidays. We were staying local so my husband could work through his recovery. And so we were already doing short day trips down to like our local mall at Shine Hills. And we started noticing that it was getting quieter and quieter until one day we went out to have lunch together and nothing was open. We'd started hearing that people were getting sick and wearing masks, which is not really uncommon around here. But when news reports started becoming more frequent that this was something serious, the streets just kind of emptied what felt like overnight. So it was it wasn't really a big deal, and then it was. And then all of a sudden, all the shops were shut, all the people were off the streets, and masks were really hard to find.
I'm enrolled in the STEP program through the State Department for U.S. citizens. So I got an email about this around Christmas. It was pretty early, and they said, pneumonia of unknown origin in Wuhan, China, keep an eye out for it more or less. And then in the 3 weeks between that and when we were going to be off for Chinese New Year, I was sort of paying attention to what was going on in the news. I kept getting a couple of emails from them. So before we left to go on our Chinese New Year break, which was to go to Beijing, as you guys know, I was sort of asking Russell the night before we left, do you think it's a good idea for us to go, given that things seem to be kicking off a little bit more? And then basically while we were on the train from Fuzhou to Beijing, the people started getting on the train in masks more and more as the day went on, because it was a long train, 8 or 9 hours. And eventually a really nice lady was walking around with a box of masks and gave us some. While we were on the train, she was like, here you go. And we were like, okay. And we had brought hand soap with us. In China sometimes there isn't soap in the bathroom, so we had our own soap with us so we could wash our hands. And then when we arrived in Beijing, I think was when we started to realize okay, this is starting to look kind of serious, because when we came into the station, everyone was in masks, and it was people were wearing some kind of scary looking masks as opposed to just some sort of surgical masks and stuff like that. And so we were there for 5 days, and while we were there, everything started to get shut down. So we basically wandered around in the city and just kind of with no one else around it. We're not, we didn't live in Beijing, so we don't really know it that well. We were just kind of oh, okay, so it's pretty quiet. And we went to a couple breweries that were still open. And yeah, it was, so basically it was sort of a slow roll. It went from being, okay, there's this email about this weird thing to, should we go on our trip, to okay, now we're on our trip, now we're here.
When I first heard about the virus, I had mentioned some things about it in China, but I don't really watch the news much because I can't understand it, nor do I have a cable box. So a lot of the news also upsets me, so I just don't really pay attention to it and just go about my daily life. But I surprised my parents, and I went home for Christmas, and my mom mentioned it. And I was like, oh yeah, that's going on. And then I started seeing more news about it. But when I went home, when I went back to China, I was like, surely it's gonna be gone. I never expected it for it to blow up as much as it has.
At one point or another, we sort of thought they might close all the trains. So we were kind of preparing for if we had to stay in Beijing for longer. But then in the end, we didn't need to do that. We went back on the train that we had already booked back to Fuzhou, and it was really empty on that train. There was almost nobody on it. But yeah, then basically since then, we've been hanging out in Fuzhou. There's not a quarantine here or anything, but we were in our apartment for like 3 weeks.
And how would you say your impressions are now?
It's a bit hard to tell. I think we're really sheltered in that we don't have a TV, we don't have news channels, we're not listening to radio. So we kind of are very sheltered with the information that we receive. And I think also we live at our school campus, so we even live in a very controlled environment where we're not seeing a lot of outside people either. So I mean, some days, I guess it also depends on our moves and where we are in the cabin fever cycle. Some days we feel really peaceful and calm. This is our home. This is where we want to be. We don't want to leave. We don't want to evacuate. But some days, you know, it does feel like the walls are falling in on you and you're not sure if you've made the right decision, especially when you have a child. When like in any kind of crisis situation, your perspective changes when you have a child. So it shifts from, well, I'm not worried and I'm not concerned about my health because I know that I can look after myself. I can take those safety precautions. But when you have a child, especially a young child, you don't know what they're going to pick up. You don't know what they're going to lick, what they're going to touch, what they're going to be interested in and then touch and put in their mouth. So that's my biggest concern is I don't want to go outside anywhere because I don't want to take my daughter out to expose her to those things. Like she's also a 4-year-old, so she wants to touch things, she wants to play. So that's the part that I struggle with, is how to keep her safe.
Now that I'm in it, this is what, week 6, 7 for us?
Oh, I think it's like week 3. Week 3 of
teaching, but
this is like week 6 of being like off work.
Yeah, so now it's really affecting me, obviously, because I'm in Bali and I'm here teaching online. When I first found out, I was pretty happy that I wasn't going to be teaching for a week or two, and I was planning to stay in the Philippines and go to all these different islands. But then the workload started coming, the pressure started coming, the stress started coming.
So at first, people definitely were staying indoors and staying away from other people. But it was also still the holiday. And so a lot of people from Fuzhou go out to the countryside anyway during Chinese New Year. It wasn't that much quieter than usual during Chinese New Year. Now it's gotten a lot more normal. Schools are still closed, obviously, and most people seem to be going back to work.
How would you say your family back home has reacted to the news?
Initially, they were quite alarmed, but I think our calmness really reassured them. And they did get quite worried when we received an email from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Australia saying that if we would like to board the evacuation plane, we could register with them. And I think once kind of our family and friends in Australia heard that the government was willing to evacuate us, they were quite worried. But for us, that was more dangerous than staying inside in our home.
Their first initial reaction was for me to go home. My mom, as a typical Latino mama, she worries a lot just for me being in China, but more so with the virus. They wanted me home, but it just financially does not make sense because I would have to buy a one-way flight to go home. And then from here, I'm in Bali, so then it's like a 34-hour flight or something. I would get home over $1,000, and then I would have to buy a one-way flight. might have good internet and a laptop, but it's a different time zone. It's a lot of money. It's spending in dollars. And I'm not going to be staying at home, just chilling on the couch. You know, eventually I'm going to want to go out with friends and go out and do things. And then that takes a lot of money. So I feel like staying in Bali is the best choice right now, because probably my entire accommodations here will equal up to like a one-way ticket home. I still know that I have their support, and if something were to happen, like I can reach out to my family. That's not the best option for me. And even though they want me home, I feel like I need to stay where I am, because sometimes the best option is not going home. It's not running away and going home from your problems. It's staying here. I'm healthy. I'm good. I think this is where I need to be for right now.
So this is going to sound really bad, but I'm kind of happy that my maternal grandmother is no longer with us, because I think she would have absolutely freaked out about it. But she is not here for like 2 years, so she's, you know, watching or something and being fine with it. As far as like most of my family, they've been kind of fine. When we're traveling, we don't have access to like the Western internet because we don't have it on our phones. So that was kind of weird, because we weren't anticipating needing to be in touch necessarily when we were gone for 5 days. And then it was like, okay, how are we going to get in touch with Russell's family if we need to? Because we only contact them usually through Facebook or Skype. And so it was difficult. Turned out they weren't all that worried anyway. They were happy to hear from us when we got back, and we were like, hey, we're fine, things are good, you know, here we are. And my family put a little bit of pressure on me to leave, but not like significant pressure. I mean, they understand that, you know, we're adults and we're making choices based on the best information we can have available. And also because Russ and I don't have the same citizenship, it makes the decision a little bit more difficult, as you might know. Yeah, because we can't go to the same place if we were to leave, because he can't come to the States necessarily. Like, he's my spouse, so he wouldn't be under the current travel ban for people coming in from China.
Remind me, where is Russell from, and why would that be difficult?
So my husband is Russ, and he's from outside London. So yeah, so having the dual nationality in your family can be a problem more broadly. It's, you know, just like annoying in terms of visa stuff. But when it comes to a situation like this, a lot of the people who were in Wuhan but didn't want to leave, for example, who were UK or US citizens, it was because their Chinese or other nationality family members could not be on the evacuation flight with them.
So what have you been doing to keep busy?
So, well, cooking a lot, because we haven't been ordering food from takeout. So normally I cook about like 80% of our meals a week, and now I've been cooking like 100%.
We have been doing lots of art and craft. Vivi will be 5 in May. So we've been doing lots of Play-Doh, lots of painting, lots of drawing, lots of dress-up, lots of cooking. We've been trying new recipes. We've also been watching a bit too much Netflix, a bit too much screen time happening, but it's all part of the process. We also, when the pollution is okay, because we live on school campus, we can use the school grounds and know that kind of there's no one else around. So that's where Corey and Vivi are right now. They've gone out for a play on the playground, burn some energy, get some exercise in, and kind of get a bit of a break from the 4 walls of the apartment.
We have an oven at our place as well, so I can like cook more Western style stuff if we wanted, or roast something if we want to do that. And then doing stuff like learning piano online, using YouTube videos or other resources, doing like crochet and sewing projects, that kind of thing. Writing and cleaning house. It's kind of weird. Like, I don't know if you feel this way, but basically I feel like it's gone a little bit faster than I thought it would. If you had told me that I would be stuck basically in our apartment for almost the whole month of February, I would have been like, wow, that's a really long time. But like, something about the days just kind of pass relatively quickly because you're not really doing very much.
What has work been like for you?
Right now, since my friend Santiago, which is Ellie's boyfriend, he brought his laptop. So that has helped me out and reduced all of my stress in that sense, because remember, I only left with my cell phone, as most teachers did. So sometimes I do wake up and I'm like, man, I have to teach. I don't feel like you're limited with the resources, you're limited with what you can do and what you can teach. But after I'm done with my classes, I feel like I'm doing what I have to do for the kids, because they've been stuck at home for, as much as you guys have been stuck at home for. So I think like when they're all telling me like good morning, or when they're saying bye to me, like I think that fulfills me.
So this year I'm not in a classroom. I'm taking on the curriculum coordinator's role, which is a new role for the early childhood department. And so that just means I'm there to support teachers in any way they can, how to ensure that our curriculum needs are being met, how to support the transition to kind of an online platform when we're not in a classroom, which for early childhood is really tricky, because for what we do, it's so much based on interaction. It's hands-on, it's practical, and so much of it can't be delivered through a screen. So we've been really trying to think of new and kind of interactive ways to engage with our children and their families, to make sure they're still getting that connection in.
So this is actually my setup for teaching classes behind me. I'm in the living room and Russ is in we have a 2-bedroom apartment, so he's in one of the bedrooms. Basically, we're using an app that's an education app meant for teaching online classes anyway, and we're teaching our normal classes, but there are adjustments for like length of time of the class and how you teach it and stuff like that.
I don't know about your class, but when I enter my class, everybody's just completely muted. Their videos are off. I think the Chinese teachers had them trained to do that. And so when I come in and I'm just like, hey, good morning, guys. And then it's silent. Sometimes like one will chime in and say, good morning, Mrs. Hatcher. And then, but at the end of the class, then they all unmute their mic and say, goodbye, Mrs. Hatcher.
Yeah. I think, it is like my favorite part. You're right, Graham. You're done with class, but then it's so cute to hear their little 20 voices like, bye,
yeah.
bye. I think it's just so, I do want to be with them, and sometimes as teachers, we're like, man, like, you get tired of working, especially around this time when you're trying to get to spring break. But I think like I really miss my kids and I really feel for them. I do have one of my students who is in Wuhan. He's not able to join my classes because he didn't take his technology, and I honestly, I don't know why else. Maybe it's a parent choice, I don't know. But I have spoken to him via WeChat, and he's one of my busy bodies in my classroom. But when I saw him, he was just beaming and like joking. So just seeing that spirit in a child, I think it says a lot about, the circumstance. And I think it just hits home in a different way.
Just to make it so that it's a little bit more easy for the kids. We do also have to do like some cover classes in case people decided to leave when this first broke and just like left, or if they're currently traveling and they're not able to access like complete computer, because you do pretty much need a laptop to be able to do the online teaching, and some of the people we work with didn't have one. So they've figured out ways to get around that by bringing desktop computers from our offices to them and stuff like that. So it's been pretty okay. It's not ideal, but it seems to work okay at the moment.
Any other final thoughts?
I think it's a really interesting time to be in China, where there's so much attention and focus on China, which is mostly in the negative light, where for me, in my experience during the coronavirus outbreak, is that we've been really impressed with the way things have been handled, with the precautions, with things being shut down and quarantined. We feel really safe here. And so I think that's something that's made it kind of a little bit easier for us to process when so many of our friends and family or other teachers, our colleagues, have left China to be in a different location. So for us, we were really kind of battling the decision, do we stay, do we go? But in the end, we decided it was best for us and our family to stay here. We feel safe, we feel comfortable. We feel that if something were to happen and we were to get sick, that we'd have the support and the facilities we'd need. So we definitely feel really grateful for that.
Interesting is to watch the news coverage from other places about China during this time, because some of it, especially at the beginning, was really just like bad. You know, it was like, it wasn't even necessarily that it was incorrect, it was just so blown out of proportion that it was surprising. And so I think one of the things that I've really noticed is in a situation like this where the information is changing every day and you don't know what's going on, it's really hard to find news sources that aren't like completely sucky, basically. And I haven't really found that many that are reliable. So I guess it's maybe something to consider if you're seeing something that looks scary from any part of the world. It's probably not fully an accurate picture of what's going on. And I think that some of that also contributed to maybe people not believing that it could have problems outside of China, like thinking it was just a China problem, more or less, and like maybe not taking the same kinds of precautions that they should have been taking in places like South Korea or Italy. It's been pretty upsetting to me to watch those two places sort of become part of the Corona party, so to speak. Because I've lived in both those places, specifically Northern Italy and specifically South Korea, as you know. So I still have people that I know who are now experiencing what we experienced in China in the first weeks of this. They are now experiencing that same kind of feeling in a different place. So yeah, basically I'm hoping that things will, it looks as if, I mean, I'm being optimistic, but it looks as if China has managed some things about how to mitigate this problem relatively well. So hopefully other places like that do have the same problem can learn some stuff from it, just because it's not perfect by any means, but like the fact that things have come down a little bit is hopeful. The situation in Korea is really crappy from what I hear from people. I don't know if you're in touch with anyone who's around there, but like it's kind of sucked because it just kind of like popped up and now it's like kind of intense at the moment. A lot of people don't have the same kind of protections from the government in terms of like when this happened here, the Chinese government was like, right, everyone gets extra holidays so then people don't lose pay. Whereas like in Korea, I know that there's a couple of people who I've talked to who, because the classes aren't running, are not being paid. Same thing in Vietnam. Many of the teachers who are working in Hanoi, for example, have had to leave because they haven't had any income for the month of February because they're paid by the hour and the schools are closed. So like, you know, I don't know. I think in some ways we weren't exactly lucky to be in China at this time, but as far as a place to be if this was going to happen, it could have been worse. I read a story about a kid who was evacuated from Wuhan, and he came back to the States. He was quarantined for 4 days, never had any symptoms, always tested negative. And when he came out of quarantine, a bunch of his friends were like, you know, asking him repeatedly, are you sure you can't infect us? You know, and refusing to shake hands with him and stuff. I'm like, he's just been through like this really horrible situation. And then you guys in the States, after all of the necessary preventative measures have been taken, are still gonna act like that? Like, it's not a good look. So.
I'm very thankful, I guess. I feel like even though, you know, I think we do have a pretty strong community, and even though you haven't seen like your friends or in a while, I think we're all going through the same thing. And sometimes to the world, it's like, oh, you're still traveling. But my travels now are a different type of travel. I'm not traveling for leisure, which is completely different. I'm traveling because there's really no saying when I can return back to China. I know I have the possibility to do that, but I don't want to put myself through that just yet, because at least here I do have some distractions, or I have some things that I can do to keep myself sane, because I'm single. I live in China by myself, and I would pretty much go crazy, especially with sometimes like not being able to access certain things, as we all know, like Netflix or some other things. So I'm very, I guess, thankful for being out of China. And also, like, the Indonesian people have been just incredibly nice, and I think I couldn't be stuck in a better place with their beaming smiles and just super nice about everything. So, and I'm surrounded by like rice fields and like a pool, so I do keep myself busy, but I do wish it ends, and I can't wait to go back to my regular China life.
Oh, I actually do miss my kids a lot.